Well, everybody, 2012 has come and gone, and personally, when judging by its films, I'd say it's been a very successful year. Not only has the critical reaction to many of the year's biggest blockbusters been incredibly strong, with some exceptions, but theater attendance has gone up for the first time in years, bringing greater hope that the classic ritual of sitting in a theater to watch an amazing movie may survive for a little longer than expected. This is especially true for the animation industry. For the first time since Tangled in 2010, an animated film has managed to cross the $200 million mark domestically, with two more films doing the same, a feat which no animated film was able to achieve in 2011. Add in some overwhelmingly positive critical reaction for a majority of the year's films, and it's fair to say that this was one of the best years for animation, period. But again, I must ask, do these films live up to what people are saying about them? Are the sinkers really that bad, or are the masterpieces really that good? Well, join me as I talk about the animated films of 2012 and decide whether or not they are worth watching. And let me just say, I was not able to see every animated film this year, so don't complain if I don't talk about a certain film, because that just means I did not see it. Now, with that said, let us begin the 2011 wrap-up of animated features. Let us begin with the first major animated release of the year, The Lorax. Boy, this is an interesting film to talk about, as people seem to either really love this movie or really hate it. As for me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't really hate this movie, but I can't really get past the fact that it does in fact have some major problems. Based on the classic Dr. Seuss book, the movie revolves around a boy named Ted, who hopes to win the heart of his older neighbor Audrey. Oh, and if you didn't guess it already, it's a play on the real names of Dr. Seuss and his wife, Ted and Audrey Giesel. Ted learns that he can impress Audrey by giving her a tree, which is a problem because trees have completely vanished in Ted's town, which, by the way, is completely synthetic and has no nature whatsoever. Taking his grandmother's advice, Ted goes outside of his town to visit the Onceler, the mad said no to what happened to the trees. He tells Ted about how he came to the land which was once flourishing with life, and how he cut down the area's stropula trees to make something called a thneed, which did not sit well with the self-proclaimed speaker of the trees, the Lorax. Despite the warnings of the Lorax, the Onceler continued to industrialize and cut down all the trees in sight. But upon the falling of the last tree, the Onceler's business falls apart, and the Lorax, as well as the denizens of the forest, leave because they can no longer live in their now polluted home. In the present day, the Onceler gives to Ted what is said to be the last truffula seed so that he may plant it and bring back the nature to the town. Unfortunately, the town's mayor tries to prevent this because apparently the trees threaten his air-making business. So with the help of his friends, Ted must plant the seed before it ends up in the hands of the evil corporate mayor. I want to say that I will only be discussing the movie. What I mean is that I will leave the film's infamous marketing campaign out of my discussion. Yeah, I can see why people hate it so much, as its numerous tie-ins do contradict the eco-friendly theme of the original source material, but that's not the movie's fault. It's the fault of the studio's advertising agency who wanted to make as much money possible without actually thinking about the movie. But that's not to say this movie doesn't have its major issues. I think its biggest issue has to be with the film's main characters. First of all, not only is Ted a boring character, but I don't really like his change in motivations. In the book, he's simply curious about what happened to the world around him and how it became such a polluted hellhole. In the movie, it's so he can impress a girl. Really? You had a good enough motivation already, so why'd you have to go and change it with something so cliché? On top of that, Audrey is just as equally dull. I guess I could forgive the movie for changing Ted's motivations if they actually made her an interesting character. But no, she's just your generic love interest. So why is she here? Well, I think it's just so they can get a celebrity voice on board. In this case, Taylor Swift. I don't really have anything against Taylor Swift. I mean, to be fair, she does a decent job in this movie, but I just hate it when movies like this try to pander to kids by hiring big-name celebrities to do voiceovers. I don't mind hiring famous people to do voices, but you have to actually make good characters. Otherwise, it's not so much seeing a character on the screen as much as it is seeing an image with a voice that you could recognize. These two are nothing, however, compared to the villain, the town's evil corporate mayor, O'Hare. My God, do I hate this guy. He's bland, he's annoying, and he serves next to no purpose whatsoever. But the thing that angers me the most has to do with the original Dr. Seuss antagonist, the Onceler. Although the story doesn't put corporate executives in the best light, it does at least try to make them human with the Onceler, making him less of a generic bad guy and more flawed and conflicted. The movie actually makes this even more so, depicting the Onceler as a much more sympathetic character, making what he goes through all the more believable. Now that is something I can agree with. I like how the movie tries to shine a brighter light on corporations with this character. But the thing is, with O'Hare, all this goes flying out the window. He has no human characteristics, no redeeming qualities, and he's basically your typical Mr. Burns, which on his own, it's bad enough. But when you're already trying to depict corporations in a realistic light, it's just flat out hypocritical. Characters aside, another big concern I have with this movie is the songs. That's right, there are musical numbers in this movie. Probably to cash in on the recent successes of such other CGI musicals such as Tangled and Rio. Do they work? No. While they're not the worst songs in the world, they are rather forgettable. They seem to have been added in at the last minute, as I can barely remember any of them. Well, that is, except maybe for the Onceler's big rap number. Yeah, it's pointless and probably would be better if the movie was absent, but good God, is it catchy. But still, are there any real redeeming values in this movie? Well, yes. First of all, the animation fits the classic Dr. Seuss style perfectly. It's colorful, cartoony, all the good things you can think of when imagining Dr. Seuss's fantastic artwork converted into computer animation. But not only that, but despite the numerous characters I dislike, the rest are actually pretty entertaining. The Lorax is pretty likable. Given the original story, they could have made him come off as rather preachy, but they managed to avoid this pretty well, in large part because Danny DeVito's wonderful performance. It really seems that he's trying to put a lot of effort into this role, especially considering he did the role in several different languages. Now that's dedication. Betty White as Ted's grandmother is absolutely hilarious because, let's face it, it's Betty White. She's probably the most famous, funny old person living on right now, and she makes the character she plays all the more humorous. Speaking of humor, the animals that live in the Truffula forests, the fish, birds, and the bear things, are also really fun to watch. To be fair, they do kind of feel like rehashings of the minions from Despicable Me, but hey, they still have their funny moments. But by far the best character, like I said earlier, is the Onceler. I like the movie's attempts to make him a more sympathetic character, and the depth they give this character really stands out. I was a little skeptical to hear Ed Helms do the voice, but after watching it, I think he did alright. Though I have to ask, what is up with the weird Onceler pics on DeviantArt? The movie triumphs best, however, when it sticks to the original story. The stuff they add in is okay for the most part, but let's face it, it does feel like some of these moments are just filler, which unfortunately happens a lot when you're adapting a short story such as the Lorax. Straight from the book are probably the ones that are most enjoyable, especially the flashback scenes with the Onceler and the Lorax. It's in these scenes where both the comedy
and the drama is done best.
As a whole, the Lorax is okay. As I said, there are a lot of things that could have been improved in the movie, but the stuff that good I think is relatively good. As a kids movie, it's pretty harmless, and it does try to teach a pretty important lesson about protecting the environment to kids. Granted, Wally did it better, but hey, at least they tried. I'm glad I saw this movie, and I guess I wouldn't mind watching it again. Is there a chance you might hate it? I suppose so, but for me, I'd say give it a chance and decide for yourself.
Bring it on, Teddy!
I could just kiss you right now. But we don't have time for that.
I don't know, we have a little time.
Dr. Seuss's The Lorax.
So who invited the giant furry peanut?
I'll go right up your nose!
Whoa!
You wouldn't hit a woman.
That's a woman?